The first grey light of morning slid through the stone mullioned window, not with the warmth of dawn, but with the colour of a fading bruise. I dressed quickly, the fine linen shirt and waistcoat from my portmanteau, feeling like a grotesque parody of my London life. My movements were sharp, frantic. The air in the chamber was stale, tasting of dust and something older, something like dry earth and forgotten roses. Purpose, or the ghost of it, propelled me. I would find the Count, demand a timetable, secure the necessary papers for my departure. This Gothic hospitality had curdled into something claustrophobic. I hurried to the door, my hand closing on the cold, wrought iron handle. I turned it. I pushed, locked, not stuck, not swollen from the damp, not bolted from the outside with some clumsy, ancient mechanism. Locked, the clean, sharp click of a modern, well-maintained lock. The sound was a punctuation mark in the silence, a full stop to my naivety. A cold knot began to form in my stomach. I moved through the castle, a marionette of growing dread. The grandiose corridor, lined with faded tapestries depicting scenes of martial triumph and demonic torment, seemed to stretch and contract as I walked. My footsteps were the only sound, swallowed by the immense, hungry stone. I tested every door I could find. Heavy oak, banded iron, some plain, some carved with leering faces. The doors to what might have been salons, armories, chapels, locked. 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 Each click was a twin to the first, a chorus of denial. My breath began to fog in the air, though the chill felt internal. I descended the grand staircase, its marble steps worn into shallow bowls by centuries of unseen feet, and approached the castle's great front doors. They were monstrous things, 12 feet high, of blackened timber and studded with iron that resembled petrified stars. I set my shoulder against them, my boots scrabbling for purchase on the flagstones. I threw my whole weight, a pathetic human battering ram against immovable history. They would not budge an inch, not a shudder. They might as well have been part of the mountain itself. "Count," I called out, my voice too high, too English in that vastness. "Count Dracula." The name echoed back to me from the vaulted ceiling, the dark archways. Dracula, Dracula, a thin, afraid, and lonely sound that mocked its own bravado. No answer came. No rustle of a cloak, no measured footfall. There were no servants, no guards scrubbing hearths or sharpening pikes. No sign of life at all. Only the corridors, which seemed longer than they had been the night before, their perspectives twisting so that the far end appeared shrouded in mist even indoors. And then I noticed something deeper, more unsettling than the silence. The castle felt aware, as if the stones had absorbed the consciousness of every soul who had ever breathed within them. As if the very walls were listening, the shadows holding their breath, the air thick with a patient, evaluating intelligence. I was not just alone, I was an exhibit. Seeking an anchor to the mundane, I returned to my chamber. There, on the wall, hung a small, oval mirror above a cracked porcelain washstand. For a moment, I hesitated, a primitive fear stirring. Then, scoffing at my own superstition, I leaned closer. My own reflection stared back, pale eyes hollowed by a sleepless night. The face of a man catching the first true scent of danger. But it was my face, I nearly laughed in relief. Then I remembered. I looked behind me, into the reflected room, the space where the Count had stood the previous night, where he had taken the candle from me with those unnervingly strong, cold fingers. Remained empty, a perfect void in the silvered glass. I told myself it was a trick of the light. I stepped aside, waved a hand. The room reflected perfectly the bed, the chest, the guttering candle on the standex set for that one space. Where I should have seen the tapestry on the far wall, there was only a distortion, a swirl of greyish haze, as if the mirror's memory had been wiped clean. Deliberately, I moved back to where he had stood. I looked into the glass, my own reflection, met my gaze, wide-eyed. Behind me, the room was empty. I was utterly, definitively alone in the reflection. A chill, sharper than any castle draft, ran through my veins, freezing the blood in its course. No man casts no reflection, only stories do, only nightmares made flesh. I turned away quickly, my heart hammering a desperate tattoo against my ribs. A trapped bird feeling the walls of its cage solidify into iron. Reason, my lifelong companion, told me to laugh. To find a scientific explanation, some peculiar quality of the glass, a trick of optics. Instinct, older and wiser, told me to pray. Determined to map the dimensions of my prison, to fight paralysis with action, I began to explore in earnest. The castle was a labyrinth of contradictions, vast and possibly so, far larger than the formidable, but finite structure I had observed from the carriage. Staircases appeared where solid walls had been, climbing endlessly upward into towers lost in gloom, while others spiraled down into subterranean depths from which a damp, earthy breath exhaled a darkness so complete it seemed a solid thing, a substance that swallowed candlelight whole and left only a faint, cowardly glow around my trembling hand. One chose upward, towards the sky, towards air, after what felt like an hour of climbing a narrow, corkscrew stair. I emerged onto a windswept battlement of the highest tower. The view stole what little breath I had left. Sheer cliffs, black and wet, fell away on every side into a dizzying abyss. No road snaked down the mountainside. No distant spark of a village window. No smoke from a chimney. No sign of the living world at all. The castle was an island not in water, but in emptiness, a stone ship adrift in a sea of mist and jagged rock. I was trapped in the truest sense. Below, the forests of the Carpathians stretched to every horizon, a limitless, dark green ocean. Patient and watchful, as I stood there, the wind carrying the scent of pine and decay, a long, mournful howl rose from the depths. Then another, and another. Wolves. But the sound, it did not speak of random hunger. It was a chorus, layered, communicating. It rose and fell, and in its rhythm, I heard a terrible, unmistakable cadence. Greeting, asterisk. Later, in a state of numb exhaustion, I discovered a library. The door was heavy oak, almost hidden in a shadowy alcove. Inside was a cavern of knowledge, a breathtaking, terrifying treasure trove. Thousands of books lined the soaring walls. Leather bindings cracked and spines crumbling, written in Latin, Greek, Cyrillic, languages I could not name. The history of the world, it seemed, sat mouldering here. Yet, as I ran my fingers along the shelves, a pattern emerged that turned my blood to ice. Every volume that concerned England, its history, its law, its geography, its railway timetables, its peerage was new. Crisp, recent bindings, pages clean and unyellowed, as if the Count studied my homeland with a predator's unnatural, focused intensity. On a great table of age-blackened wood, maps were laid out. Not ancient charts, but modern, detailed surveys of London. The city was dissected. Westminster, the docks, the financial district. Neat, precise marks dotted the street's notations in a sharp, angular hand. Measurements of distances, lists of populous neighborhoods, properties circled. It was a campaign map, a plan of acquisition. I felt suddenly utterly small, insignificant. Not a man, but a resource. Like an insect pinned beneath a collector's glass, my wings spread for his scrutiny. You find my library adequate. The voice came from directly behind me, though I had heard no door open, no footfall. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. The Count stood there, as if he had coalesced from the very shadows. He was smiling, but it was a smile that did not touch the profound stillness of his eyes, which were like pools of dark water under a moonless sky. "You will stay with me some time," he said calmly, gliding past me to trail a long-nailed finger over the map of London. "There is much you can teach me. The English way, the bustle of your modern life. It fascinates me." I found my voice, a dry rasp. "Count, my business in England is pressing. When might I arrange my departure?" His smile thinned, the skin stretching taut over his sharp cheekbones. "All in good time, my friend. In time." He spoke then of England with a fervor that was almost religious. Its teeming streets, its endless crowds, its river thick with ships, its bright, pulsing heart of commerce and life. His eyes shone as he spoke, but not with joy or intellectual curiosity. It was a deep, voracious hunger, the gleam of a starved man describing a feast. The candlelight, I noticed, behaved strangely around him. It did not flicker in any draught from his movement, but it seemed to dim as if the light itself was drawn into and consumed by his presence. My gaze fell to his hands, resting on the table. Long, pale fingers, the nails sharp and finely pointed. They were not the hands of an old man. They showed no tremor, no liver spots, no traces of age. But they were not young hands either. They were simply outside of time. Hands that had never known the warming glow of a hearth, never fumbled in nervousness, never clasped another in warmth. They were instruments of pure will. When he stepped closer, under the pretense of pointing out a district on the map, the air grew perceptibly colder. A winter seemed to emanate from him. "The day wanes," he said softly, his breath carrying no warmth, smelling of grave mold and old copper. "Night comes. You are pale, my friend. You should rest." He turned, the folds of his deep crimson robe swirling. And then he was gone, not through the door, which remained shut. One moment he was there, a solid figure at the edge of the lamplight. The next, the space was empty, as if he had been swallowed by the waiting darkness beyond the circle of illumination. I was alone, the detailed maps of my home city spread before me like a menu. That night, sleep was a treacherous country. I plunged into it, exhausted, only to be dragged back to the surface by a sound. A rustle, movement, soft, careful. deliberate. The iron handle of my door turned with a squeak that screamed through the silent castle. 3 figures entered, gliding rather than walking. Women, they were of an unearthly, devastating beauty, with hair like cascading night and skin that glowed with a pallid luminescence. Their gowns were of the finest, most antiquated style, white and gauzy, clinging to forms of perfect, frozen youth. But their eyes burned with a hellish, ruby light. Their lips were full, a violent red, parted in silent, hungry anticipation as they approached my bed. A languid, sweet paralysis held me. I could not move a muscle, could not raise a hand, could not force a scream from my petrified throat. They leaned over me, their scent a cloying mixture of crushed roses and something beneath it, something sweetly rotten, like decay perfumed. One, the most beautiful, and therefore the most terrible, bent her head. She whispered my name, Jonathan, though I had never spoken it here. Her voice was the sound of honey dripping onto a tombstone. Her breath was icy against my skin. I felt the sharp points of her teeth brush my jugular, a promise of exquisite, final pain. BACK. The roar shook the room, vibrating in the stones. A force like a gale tore the women from me. They were flung back, their beautiful faces twisting into masks of feral spite. The Count stood in the doorway, fury making him seem to swell, to fill the space. His eyes blazed with a red light deeper and more terrible than theirs. "He is mine," he snarled, the words dripping with a possessive, elemental fury. "You dare to touch what is mine. Go." The women did not cower. They hissed, baring their teeth, but they began to fade, dissolving into a mist that reeked of their perfume. Their laughter lingered, a sound of crystalline malice, echoing from the walls long after their forms had vanished. The Count turned. To me, the fury drained from his face, replaced by that placid, paternal calm. He approached the bed, looking down at me where I lay, frozen and gasping. "Sleep, Mr. Harker," he commanded, his voice now a lullaby of the grave. "No one will disturb you again." He made a slight, almost casual gesture with his hand. A blanket of absolute, suffocating darkness fell over my mind. Not the natural darkness of sleep, but something sentient and thick. It swallowed me whole. I awoke at a dawn that brought no light, only a grey shift in the endless gloom. My body was a vessel of aches. My throat burned with a peculiar, internal fire. My strength, the vigour I had brought from London, was fading, leaching from me as if the very air were a siphon. I knew then, with a clarity that was itself a kind of agony, what I was: not a guest, not a prisoner of war. Provisions, the castle was not merely holding me. It was feeding on me, slowly, deliberately. I was a stocked larder, a vintage to be savoured, and my terror was the brine that seasoned the meat. As I write this now, my hand shakes so violently the script is barely legible. The candle on my desk grows short, its flame guttering in a non-existent draught. Its light now stretching only a few feeble feet before being choked by the dark. The Count has begun to speak in our strained, polite conversations of travel, of the schedules of ships departing from Varna, of the handling of large crates of native earth, of the sweet, deep silence of a stone cellar in a London purveyor of fine wines. He speaks of London. If he leaves this place, this stone island of ancient evil, he will not go alone. A legion of shadows will sail with him, packed in earth from these blasphemous grounds, and I may be among them, a whispering, hungry thing in a box, or a dried husk discarded in these mountains. Night approaches again. I hear the wolves in the forest, their howls no longer a greeting, but a keen of impatience. I hear or feel in the very marrow of my bones the faint, silvery laughter of the women, echoing not in the corridors, but in the walls themselves. And somewhere in this vast, watching Casilla, creature that is the castle's heart and master the Count is preparing, folding maps, studying ledgers, dreaming of a city of millions, a boundless feast under a perpetual cloak of coal smoke and fog. If this journal ends here, if my words are found scratched onto these final pages, know that evil is not confined to ruins and mountains. It is not a superstition. It is a patient, intelligent force that studies and plans and hungers. Sometimes it does not wait for you to come to it. Sometimes, having tasted your life, your world, your home, it comes to your door. Asterisk.